This is a story about a love that should have been written in the stars, but was instead buried in silence. A story about an Omega who was loved in secret and discarded in public. A story about an Alpha King who chose power over his mate, and now drowns an entire realm in blood trying to undo that choice. This is a story about Kathleen, the woman who vanished, and Rudolph, the king who can't stop searching. The scent of blood had become as familiar to him as breathing. Alpha King Rudolph Thorn stood at the edge of the ravaged Pack territory, watching smoke rise from what used to be homes. His wolf prowled beneath his skin, restless, violent, hungry for more destruction. The winter wind carried ash and the metallic tang of death, but none of it touched him anymore. He had stopped feeling anything except the gaping void where his mate Bond should have been. 3 years. 3 years of tearing through the shifter realm like a plague. 3 years of interrogations, threats, bloodshed, and still nothing. No trace. No whisper. No sign of the woman who had haunted every breath he took since the night she disappeared. Kathleen. Even thinking her name was agony. His second-in-command, Emmett, approached cautiously. Everyone approached Rudolph cautiously now. The Alpha King who had once been known for his strategic mind and controlled power was now a creature of pure devastation. Unpredictable. Merciless. Emmett stopped several feet away. His eyes lowered in submission. "My king, the Pack elders are dead. The survivors claim they know nothing about her whereabouts. They're telling the truth, I consent it." Rudolph didn't turn. His jaw clenched so hard it ached. "Then burn the rest." "My king." "Did I stutter, Emmett?" Rudolph's voice was soft, deadly. The kind of quiet that preceded slaughter. "If they have no information, they have no value. Burn it all." Emmett hesitated for only a heartbeat before bowing. "Yes, my king." As Emmett walked away to deliver the order, Rudolph closed his eyes and reached inward, searching for the bond that had once connected him to Kathleen. It was like grasping at smoke. Cold. Severed. She had cut herself off from him completely. The memory crashed into him unbidden, as it always did. The night of his coronation. The night he had stood before the entire shifter realm with another woman by his side. Geneva Silvercrest, daughter of the most powerful Alpha bloodline in the Eastern Territories. Beautiful, poised, politically perfect. Everything Kathleen wasn't. He could still see Kathleen's face in the crowd that night, partially hidden behind a stone pillar in the Great Hall. Those storm-gray eyes that had once looked at him with such tender devotion were empty, hollow, already gone even though she still stood there. She had worn a simple gray dress, nothing like the glittering gowns of the nobles around her. She didn't belong in that world of crowns and thrones. She had only ever belonged with him. And he had destroyed her. The mate bond had snapped into place 6 months before his coronation. Rudolph had been walking through the palace gardens when he caught her scent, soft rain and wild jasmine, and his wolf had gone absolutely feral. He had found her in the servants' quarters, an Omega who worked in the palace laundries, and the moment their eyes met, the world had rewritten itself. She was his. Destined. Fated. The other half of his soul. And she was completely unacceptable. An Omega with no pack, no family, no name. The council would never approve. The noble families would riot. His enemies would see it as weakness, proof that the Thorn bloodline was diluting itself with inferior genetics. Everything his father had built, everything Rudolph had sacrificed to maintain, would crumble. So he had made a choice. He had kept Kathleen in the shadows, loved her in secret, in stolen moments between council meetings and diplomatic dinners. He had touched her in darkened corridors, kissed her in empty rooms, whispered promises he knew he couldn't keep. And she had accepted it all with a quiet grace that had broken his heart even as he shattered hers. She never asked for more. Never demanded to be acknowledged. She had simply loved him, completely and unconditionally, even as she watched him prepare to crown another woman as his Luna. The night before the coronation, Rudolph had gone to her chambers one final time. Kathleen had been standing by the window, moonlight painting her dark hair silver. She had turned to look at him, and he had seen the truth in her eyes. She already knew. "You're really going to do it," she had whispered. Not a question. Statement of fact. Rudolph had wanted to lie, to offer some comfort, but the words died in his throat. "I have to. You understand that, don't you? The realm needs stability. The council needs. What about what I need?" Her voice had cracked, the first time he had ever heard her sound anything but gentle. "What about what we need? Kathleen. I'm your mate, Rudolph." Tears had streamed down her face, silent and devastating. "Fate chose us. The moon goddess herself bound our souls together, and you're going to stand in front of the entire realm tomorrow and reject that bond. You're going to reject me." He had stepped toward her, but she had flinched away. That small movement had cut deeper than any blade. "I'm not rejecting you," he had said desperately. "Geneva will be Luna in title only. You're my true mate. That will never change. We can still." "Still what?" Kathleen had laughed bitterly. "Still meet in secret. Still hide what we are. Still pretend that you haven't chosen duty over me every single day since the bond awakened." Rudolph had had no answer. Kathleen had wiped her tears and straightened her shoulders, and in that moment, she had looked more regal than any queen he had ever seen. "I won't watch you crown her." "Can't. But I need you to know something, Rudolph. I would have given up everything for you. My pride, my dignity, my place in this world. Already did. But you won't even give up your reputation." Those had been the last words she ever spoke to him. The next night, after the coronation, after he had placed the Luna's crown on Geneva's head and sealed his fate, Rudolph had gone to find Kathleen. Her chambers had been empty. Stripped bare. No note, no explanation, just the faint scent of rain and jasmine slowly fading from the walls. She was gone. And the mate bond, that sacred connection that should have been unbreakable, had gone deathly cold. Rudolph opened his eyes, dragging himself back from the memory that still felt like an open wound. The present was no kinder than the past. Around him, his warriors moved through the burning pack territory with mechanical efficiency, searching for information they would never find, because nobody knew where Kathleen had gone. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist. In the first weeks after her disappearance, Rudolph had told himself she would come back, that she needed time to process the rejection, to grieve, but that ultimately the mate bond would draw her home. He had been wrong. By the second month, panic had set in. He had sent his best trackers into every territory, offered obscene rewards for information, and still found nothing. By the 6th month, Geneva had started asking questions. His false Luna had been patient at first, understanding even. She knew their marriage was political, that Rudolph's heart belonged elsewhere. But as his obsession with finding Kathleen consumed him, as he spent less time ruling and more time hunting, Geneva's patience had worn thin. The confrontation had been inevitable. Rudolph remembered standing in the throne room, maps spread across every surface, packed territories marked in red where he planned to search next. Geneva had walked in wearing her Luna crown, the symbol of everything wrong in his life, and her expression had been cold. "You need to stop this," she had said simply. Rudolph hadn't even looked up from the maps. "I don't recall asking for your opinion." "She's gone, Rudolph. She doesn't want to be found. Can't you see that? Can't you respect her choice?" That had made him look up. The rage that lived permanently in his chest had flared hot. "Respect her choice. I am her mate. She belongs with me." "The bond. The bond you rejected," Geneva had interrupted sharply. "The bond you severed when you chose me over her in front of the entire realm. You don't get to claim mate rights after what you did." Rudolph had moved faster than thought, crossing the room until he loomed over Geneva. His wolf had been so close to the surface that his eyes had flickered gold. "Careful, Geneva. You may wear the crown, but you are not my mate. You will never be my mate." To her credit, Geneva hadn't flinched. "No, I'm not. But I am your Luna, and I'm watching you destroy everything for a woman who clearly wants nothing to do with you." The packs are terrified. The council is losing faith. You're becoming a tyrant, Rudolph. Is this what she would have wanted? The question had struck something deep inside him, something that still had the capacity to feel shame. But he had buried it quickly beneath anger. Get out, Rudolph. Get out before I forget that you're under my protection. Geneva had left without another word. That had been 2 years ago. She still wore the Luna crown because Rudolph needed the political alliance her family provided, but they barely spoke anymore. She lived in the eastern wing of the palace while Rudolph haunted the western corridors like a ghost, sleeping in rooms that still held traces of Kathleen's scent, though they grew fainter with each passing day. The truth was, Geneva had been right. Rudolph was becoming a monster. The Alpha King who had once been respected across the realm was now feared. He had violated pact treaties, ignored ancient laws, and killed anyone who stood between him and information about Kathleen's whereabouts. The council met in secret now, whispering about his instability, debating whether an Alpha King could be dethroned for madness. Let them try, Rudolph thought darkly. He would burn them all. Emmett returned, his face grim. The territory is clear, my king. No survivors, no information. Where do we search next? Rudolph pulled a map from his coat pocket. It was worn, stained with blood and dirt from months of carrying it across the realm. Red marks covered nearly every major pact territory. He had searched them all. The only places left were the outlaw lands, the lawless territories beyond the realm's borders where rogues and exiles gathered. Places too dangerous even for an Alpha King to enter without an army. Places where someone who wanted to disappear completely might hide. The Shadowlands, Rudolph said, his finger tracing the unmarked space on the map's edge. We move at dawn. Emmett's expression tightened. My king, the Shadowlands aren't governed by pact law. If we enter with force, we could start a war with every rogue faction in the region. And the witch covens that control those territories don't recognize your authority. Then they'll learn to, Rudolph said flatly. Gather the warriors. We leave in 6 hours. As Emmett walked away to relay the orders, Rudolph felt his wolf stir with something that might have been anticipation. The Shadowlands were his last option. If Kathleen wasn't there, if he couldn't find even a whisper of her existence, then he would have to accept the possibility that Geneva and everyone else kept suggesting but he refused to believe. That Kathleen was dead. The thought made his wolf howl in anguish. Well, she couldn't be dead. He would know. The bond might be severed, cold and lifeless, but if she had truly died, he would have felt it. Wouldn't he? Mates were supposed to sense each other's deaths, even across great distances. The fact that he felt nothing, absolutely nothing, had to mean she was alive somewhere. It had to. Because if she was dead, if his choice had driven her to death, then he was beyond redemption. Then every drop of blood he had spilled, every pack he had destroyed, every law he had broken had been for nothing. Then he truly was the monster everyone whispered about. Rudolph looked down at his hands. They were stained with ash and blood, calloused from wielding weapons instead of signing treaties. These were not the hands of a king anymore. They were the hands of a man who had lost everything that mattered and was desperately clawing his way through the darkness trying to find it again. I'm sorry, he whispered to the wind, knowing she couldn't hear him, knowing his apologies were 3 years too late. I'm so sorry, Kathleen. But I will find you. I will make this right. I swear it on my crown, on my life, on everything I am. I will find you. The wind carried his words away into the smoke-filled sky, unanswered. Somewhere beyond the borders of the known realm, in territories marked only by danger and lawlessness, a woman with storm-gray eyes paused in her work. She touched her chest where the mate bond used to burn bright and constant, now cold and silent, severed by magic and desperation. She didn't know why her heart suddenly ached. She had spent 3 years making sure it never would again. The Shadowlands smelled like smoke, defiance, and freedom. Kathleen moved through the crowded market with practiced ease, her hood pulled low over her face. Here, in the lawless territories beyond the reach of pack politics and alpha kings, she had finally learned to breathe again. No one asked about bloodlines or rank. No one cared that she had been born an Omega with nothing to her name. In the Shadowlands, your worth was measured by your ability to survive, and Kathleen had become very good at surviving. She stopped at a vendor selling herbs and tinctures, her fingers brushing over dried wolfsbane and silver root. The vendor, an elderly witch with clouded eyes, smiled knowingly. "Back again, little wolf," the witch croaked. "That's the third time this moon cycle you've bought suppression herbs. The bond still troubling you?" Kathleen's jaw tightened. "Just need to restock." The witch's milky eyes seemed to see straight through Kathleen's hood, straight through her carefully constructed walls. "You can suppress a bond, child, but you can't kill what the moon goddess herself created. Sooner or later, it finds a way back." "Then I'll keep cutting it down," Kathleen said firmly, placing coins on the worn wooden counter. "Again and again, for the rest of my life if I have to." The witch wrapped the herbs in brown paper, her gnarled fingers surprisingly gentle. "And what happens when he finds you? Because you and I both know he's looking. The whole realm knows. They say the Alpha King has gone mad searching for his lost mate." Kathleen's hands trembled slightly as she took the package. "He won't find me. And even if he does, I'm not the woman he remembers. That Kathleen died the night he crowned another woman." "Did she?" The witch tilted her head. "Or did she just learn to hide better?" Kathleen didn't answer. She tucked the herbs into her satchel and disappeared back into the crowd before the witch could ask any more questions that cut too close to truth. The truth was complicated. The truth was that Kathleen had barely made it out of the northern realm alive. The night she fled the palace, she had known that simply running wouldn't be enough. The mate bond would lead Rudolph straight to her no matter where she went. So she had done the unthinkable. She had sought out a witch, one of the ancient ones who still practiced the old magic, and she had asked for the bond to be severed. The witch had warned her. Severing a mate bond wasn't like cutting a rope. It was like tearing out a piece of your soul. The pain would be excruciating, the recovery long, and there was no guarantee she would survive it. Weaker wolves had died from less. But Kathleen had been beyond caring about survival. She had looked at that witch with hollow eyes and said, "Do it." The ritual had nearly killed her. She remembered screaming until her voice gave out, remembered feeling like she was being ripped apart from the inside, remembered the exact moment when the golden thread connecting her to Rudolph had shattered like glass. When it was over, she had collapsed, unconscious for 3 days, and when she finally woke, the space where Rudolph used to live in her heart was cold and empty. She had thought the emptiness would be a relief. Instead, it felt like drowning. But she had survived. She had dragged herself into the Shadowlands, found work, built a new life. She had learned to fight, to defend herself, to trust no one. And slowly, painfully, she had begun to heal. Or so she told herself. Kathleen made her way through the winding streets to a weathered building on the edge of the market district. The sign above the door read, "Maven's Haven," in faded letters. It was a boarding house for displaced wolves, rogues, and anyone else who needed a place to hide from their past. Kathleen had been living there for 2 years, working as Maven's assistant in exchange for room and board. Maven herself was in the kitchen when Kathleen entered, stirring a massive pot of stew. She was a large woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, a former pack wolf who had lost her family in a territorial war and rebuilt her life in the Shadowlands. She had taken one look at Kathleen's haunted expression 3 years ago and offered her shelter without asking questions. "You're back late," Maven said without looking up from her stirring. "Everything all right?" "Fine," Kathleen lied, setting her satchel on the counter. "Just busy at the market." Maven hummed skeptically. "Christine came by earlier. Said there's been talk. Rumors about the Alpha King's forces moving toward the border territories. Some of the rogue packs are getting nervous." Kathleen's blood went cold. "How close?" "Close enough that people are starting to ask questions about why he's so determined to search the Shadowlands." Maven finally looked at Kathleen, her expression serious. "You should know that if he does come here, if he brings his army into these territories, there will be war. The rogue packs won't tolerate an alpha king trying to enforce his authority in the lawless lands. A lot of people will die. Guilt twisted in Kathleen's stomach. Maven, I never meant. I know, sweetheart. Maven's voice softened. You didn't ask for any of this. But that doesn't change what's happening. The Alpha King is drowning the realm in blood looking for you, and eventually, that blood is going to reach our doorstep. Kathleen sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. What am I supposed to do? Go back to him. Let him drag me back to the palace like some kind of prize he's reclaimed. Pretend that what he did to me didn't break something fundamental inside me. No, Maven said firmly. You don't owe him anything. But you might need to make a choice about what you're willing to risk to stay hidden. Because if war comes to the Shadowlands, innocent people will pay the price for a king's obsession. Before Kathleen could respond, the door slammed open. Christine, Maven's daughter and one of Kathleen's few friends in the Shadowlands, burst in with wild eyes and flushed cheeks. She was breathing hard like she had run the entire way. They're here, Christine gasped. The Alpha King's forces. They crossed into the Shadowlands an hour ago. Hundreds of warriors. And he's with them. Kathleen stood so fast her chair toppled backward. What? He's demanding an audience with the Rogue Council. Threatening to tear through every settlement until someone gives him information about a missing Omega. Christine looked directly at Kathleen. He's looking for you. And he's not leaving until he finds you. The room spun. Kathleen gripped the table's edge to steady herself, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 years. 3 years of hiding, of building walls around her heart, of convincing herself she had moved on. And now Rudolph was here, less than a day's journey away, tearing through the only safe place she had left. How long do we have? Kathleen's voice came out steadier than she felt. Christine shook her head. The council is meeting with him at dawn. They'll try to negotiate by time, but everyone knows how this ends. He'll search every building, question every person. And if anyone tries to stop him. She didn't need to finish the sentence. They all knew what the Alpha King had become. They had all heard the stories of burning territories and slaughtered packs. Maven moved to Kathleen's side, placing a weathered hand on her shoulder. You need to run. Tonight. I have contacts in the southern wastes who can hide you. If you leave now. No. The word came out harder than Kathleen intended. She took a breath, forced herself to think past the panic clawing at her throat. No more running. If I leave, he'll just follow. He'll destroy the Shadowlands looking for me. And then he'll destroy the next place, and the next. This doesn't end until. She trailed off, the realization settling over her like a shroud. Until what? Christine asked quietly. Until I face him. Until I make him understand that I'm not his to find. That I'm not his at all anymore. But Kathleen couldn't say that out loud. Because deep in the cold, empty space where the mate bond used to live, something had stirred when Christine said his name. Something she had spent 3 years trying to kill. I need to think, Kathleen said, moving toward the stairs. Just give me some time to think. In her small room under the eaves, Kathleen paced like a caged animal. The space was sparse, just a bed, a trunk of belongings, and a single window overlooking the street below. She had kept it deliberately empty, refusing to put down roots, always ready to run again if necessary. Now she wondered if that instinct had been preparing her for exactly this moment. She pulled the package of suppression herbs from her satchel and stared at it. For 3 years, she had taken them religiously, using magic and medicine to keep the severed mate bond from trying to regenerate. The witch had warned her that mate bonds were resilient, that even severed they would seek to repair themselves. Kathleen had done everything in her power to prevent that. But now, staring at the brown paper package, she wondered if keeping the bond suppressed had been a mistake. Because without it, she had no way of knowing where Rudolph was, what he was feeling, what he was planning. She was blind to the one person who posed the greatest threat to her freedom. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. It's me, Maven's voice called softly. Kathleen opened the door to find Maven holding a steaming mug of tea. The older woman entered and closed the door behind her, her expression troubled. "I've been thinking," Maven said, handing Kathleen the mug, "about what you said downstairs. About this not ending until you face him. Maven, hear me out." Maven sat on the edge of the bed, patting the space beside her. Kathleen sat reluctantly. "You've been running from your past for 3 years, and I've never pushed you to talk about it. But maybe it's time. Because that man out there, the one burning his way through the realm, he's not going to stop. And you know it." Kathleen wrapped her hands around the warm mug, letting the heat anchor her. "What do you want me to say? That I still love him? That some broken part of me wishes things had been different?" "I want you to tell me the truth," Maven said gently. "About what he did to you. About why you ran. Because I've seen a lot of broken hearts in my time, sweetheart, but I've never seen someone sever their own mate bond to escape one." The story spilled out of Kathleen like poison being drawn from a wound. She told Maven everything. About falling in love with the future Alpha King in stolen moments. About the mate bond awakening and Rudolph's immediate panic. About being hidden away like a shameful secret while he courted Geneva Silvercrest in public. About watching him place a crown on another woman's head while the mate bond screamed in agony inside her chest. "He kept telling me it didn't change anything," Kathleen whispered, tears streaming down her face. "That Geneva was just political, that I was his true mate, that we could still be together. But he wanted me to accept being hidden forever. To watch him build a life with someone else while I remained in the shadows, grateful for whatever scraps of attention he could spare me." Maven's eyes were wet with sympathy. "Oh, child. The worst part." Kathleen laughed bitterly. "I almost accepted it. I almost convinced myself that loving him in secret was enough. That being his dirty little secret was better than losing him completely. How pathetic is that?" "It's not pathetic," Maven said firmly. "It's what the mate bond does. It makes you willing to accept things you never should have to accept. It's not your fault that he failed you." "But now he's destroying everything to find me," Kathleen said, her voice breaking. "And I don't know if it's because he actually loves me or because his pride can't handle that I left him. That I chose myself over him." Maven was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "What do you want, Kathleen? Not what you think you should want. Not what's logical or safe. What does your heart want?" Kathleen closed her eyes. The answer came easier than it should have. "I want him to hurt the way he made me hurt. I want him to understand what it feels like to love someone who won't claim you. I want him to beg for forgiveness and then I want to walk away." She opened her eyes, meeting Maven's gaze. "I want him to know that he lost me. Permanently. Irreversibly. And that it's entirely his own fault." Maven nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time you told him that yourself. You think I should go to him? I think you should stop letting him control the narrative. Right now you're running and he's chasing. But what if you changed the dynamic? What if you went to him on your terms, and made it clear that you're not some prize to be reclaimed?" The idea was terrifying and tempting. Before Kathleen could respond, Christine's voice called urgently from downstairs. "Maven! Kathleen! You need to see this." They rushed down to find Christine standing at the window, her face pale. In the street below, a crowd had gathered, all of them staring toward the settlement's edge. Smoke rose in thick black columns against the dawn sky. "He's not waiting for the council meeting," Christine breathed. "He's already started burning." Kathleen's blood turned to ice as she watched the smoke billow into the sky. Screams echoed through the settlement, distant but growing closer. The Alpha King wasn't negotiating. He wasn't asking permission. He was doing what he had done to every territory that refused to give him answers. He was destroying it. "That's the Eastern Quarter," Maven said, her voice tight with fear. "The rogue families live there. Children, Kathleen. There are children in those buildings." Something inside Kathleen snapped. 3 years of guilt, of running, of telling herself that the blood Rudolph spilled wasn't her responsibility, shattered like glass. She had convinced herself that staying hidden was the right choice, that letting him search endlessly was better than facing him. But watching innocent people pay the price for a king's obsession made her realize the truth. This was her fault. Not because she had run, but because she had let it go on for so long. "I'm going to him," Kathleen said, her voice cold and clear. "Kathleen, no." Maven grabbed her arm. "If I don't, he'll burn the entire Shadowlands to ash." Kathleen pulled away gently but firmly. "This ends now. Tonight. On my terms." Christine stepped forward, pressing something into Kathleen's hand. A silver dagger, small but wickedly sharp. "Then don't go unarmed. And don't go alone. I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. Try and stop me." Christine's eyes flashed with determination. "You've been my friend for 2 years. You think I'm letting you walk into the Alpha King's camp without backup?" Maven looked between them, then sighed in resignation. "You're both fools. But you're brave fools." She disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a small vial of dark liquid. "Wolf's Bane extract. If things go wrong, 1 drop in his drink will weaken him enough for you to escape. Don't hesitate to use it." Kathleen tucked the vial into her belt alongside the dagger. Her hands were steady, but her heart hammered against her ribs. She was about to face the man who had broken her, the mate who had chosen duty over destiny, the king who had spent 3 years proving that his obsession was stronger than his love had ever been. But this time, she wouldn't be the desperate Omega begging to be chosen. This time, she would be the one with the power to walk away. The journey to the Alpha King's encampment took less than an hour. They followed the smoke and the screams, joined by a stream of refugees fleeing in the opposite direction. Families clutched children and meager possessions, their faces streaked with soot and terror. Kathleen's resolve hardened with each terrified face she passed. Rudolph's camp was exactly what she expected. Military precision. Hundreds of warriors arranged in perfect formation around a command tent that flew the silver wolf banner of the Northern Realm. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their eyes cold and alert. This wasn't an exploration party. This was an invasion force. "How do we get in?" Christine whispered from their hiding spot behind a cluster of rocks. "We don't sneak in." Kathleen stood, brushing dirt from her cloak. "We walk in." "That's insane." "He's looking for me. So I'll let him find me." Kathleen met Christine's worried gaze. "Stay here. If I'm not back in an hour, go. Get Maven and run as far from here as you can." "Kathleen." But Kathleen was already walking toward the camp, her hood pushed back, her face exposed for the first time in 3 years. She felt the moment the guards spotted her. Felt their confusion, their hesitation, and then the sudden recognition. One of them sprinted toward the command tent. Within seconds, warriors surrounded her. Weapons drawn, eyes glowing with wolf instinct, ready to kill or capture on command. Kathleen stood perfectly still, her hands visible. Her expression calm even as her heart threatened to beat out of her chest. "I'm here to see the Alpha King," she said clearly. "Tell him Kathleen has come to surrender." The word tasted like ashes in her mouth. But it had the desired effect. A ripple went through the warriors. Orders were shouted. And then the crowd parted like a sea, creating a path straight to the command tent. Rudolph emerged slowly, as if he didn't trust his own eyes. 3 years had changed him. The man Kathleen remembered had been controlled, calculated, every emotion carefully masked behind political grace. The man standing before her now looked feral. His dark hair was longer, unkempt. His clothes were travel-worn and blood-stained. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. They glowed molten gold. His wolf so close to the surface that she could see it staring at her through his human gaze. He looked like a man who had been drowning and had just broken the surface. Kathleen. Her name on his lips was prayer and curse combined. She forced herself to remain still as he approached, forced herself not to react to the mate bond, trying desperately to regenerate, sending painful sparks through the cold space in her chest. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into his features, the darkness under his eyes, the tension in every line of his body. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 years. Good, a vicious part of her thought. Let him suffer. You're real, Rudolph breathed, stopping just out of reach. His hand lifted as if to touch her face, then fell. I didn't know if you were alive or... I'm alive, Kathleen said flatly. Though not for lack of trying on your part. Tell me, how many people have died in your search for me? How many packs have you slaughtered? How many territories have you burned? Rudolph flinched. I had to find you. The bond. There is no bond. Kathleen's voice was ice. I severed it. 3 years ago. The night you crowned your false Luna and proved that I meant nothing to you. The color drained from Rudolph's face. You severed our mate bond. What did you expect me to do? Kathleen's control cracked, rage bleeding through. Watch you build a life with another woman. Accept being your secret shame for the rest of my existence. You made your choice, Rudolph. So I made mine. That's not, I never wanted. Rudolph ran his hands through his hair, the gesture so familiar it hurt. Kathleen, please. Me explain. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Geneva means nothing to me. She never did. You're my mate, my true mate, and I. Stop. Kathleen held up her hand. I didn't come here for apologies or explanations. I came here to tell you to your face that you need to stop this. Stop the searching. Stop the killing. Stop destroying innocent lives because your pride can't handle that I left you. Pride. Rudolph's voice rose. You think this is about pride? Kathleen, I've been losing my mind. Every day without you is agony. My wolf is going insane. I can't eat, can't sleep, can't think about anything except finding you and making this right. You can't make this right. Kathleen shouted, finally letting 3 years of pain explode outward. You can't make this right. Kathleen shouted, finally letting 3 years of pain explode outward. Do you understand that? You can't undo what you did to me. You can't erase the night I watched you crown another woman while our mate bond screamed in agony. You can't take back the months you kept me hidden like I was something to be ashamed of. You can't fix this with pretty words and belated regret, Rudolph. The entire camp had gone silent. Warriors watched their king face the wrath of the Omega he had destroyed, and not one of them dared to intervene. Rudolph's face was stricken, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I know I can't undo it. But Kathleen, I'm begging you. Begging. Kathleen laughed, the sound bitter and broken. Now you beg. Where was this desperation when I needed you to stand beside me? Where was this passion when the council questioned my worth? You had every opportunity to choose me, Rudolph. Every single day for months, you could have said no to Geneva, no to the council, no to everyone who told you I wasn't good enough. But you didn't. I was afraid. The admission tore out of Rudolph like a confession. I was terrified of what choosing you would cost me. The council, the noble families, my father's legacy, everything I had been raised to protect. I thought I was being strategic, practical. I thought I could have both, the crown and you. I didn't understand that by trying to keep both, I would lose the only thing that actually mattered. Kathleen's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Do you know what it's like to love someone who sees you as a liability? To feel the mate bond pulling you toward someone who looks at you and sees a political disaster instead of their destined partner? Every time you touched me in secret, every time you whispered that you loved me while refusing to claim me publicly, you drove a knife deeper into my heart. I did love you, Rudolph insisted desperately. I do love you. More than anything, more than the crown, more than my own life. Loving me wasn't the problem. Kathleen's voice cracked. You loved me, but you didn't choose me. And that's what destroyed me. Because love without choice, love without courage, love without sacrifice. That's not real love, Rudolph. That's just selfishness dressed up in pretty feelings. Rudolph stepped closer, and this time Kathleen didn't back away. She stood her ground, letting him see every ounce of pain he had caused reflected in her eyes. "You're right," he said quietly. "Everything you're saying is right. I was selfish. I was a coward. I prioritized everything else over you, and I have no excuse for that. But Kathleen, please, I'm not that man anymore. These 3 years without you have broken something fundamental in me. I don't care about the council. I don't care about political alliances. I don't care about anything except getting you back." "And what about Geneva?" Kathleen demanded. "Your Luna. Your political prize. What happens to her if I come back?" Rudolph's jaw tightened. "I'll annul the marriage. I'll break the alliance with the Silvercrest Pack. I'll do whatever it takes. You'll start a war. Then I'll start a war." His voice was absolute. "I'll burn the entire realm to the ground if that's what it takes to have you by my side where you belong." Kathleen stared at him, searching his face for any hint of the man she had loved. But all she saw was obsession, desperation, and a dangerous kind of madness. This wasn't the Rudolph who had whispered sweet promises in darkened corridors. This was a man who had lost everything and was willing to destroy anything to get it back. "That's exactly the problem," Kathleen said softly. "You're willing to start wars, to kill innocents, to tear the realm apart. But 3 years ago, you weren't willing to stand up to a council of old men. You'll fight the entire world for me now, but when it actually mattered, you wouldn't even fight for me in a political meeting." The words landed like physical blows. Rudolph stumbled back a step, his face ashen. "I came here tonight for one reason," Kathleen continued, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "To tell you to stop. Stop searching for me. Stop destroying lives. Stop pretending that dragging me back to the palace will fix what you broke. I don't want your kingdom. I don't want your crown. And I don't want you." "You don't mean that." Rudolph's voice was barely a whisper. "I severed our mate bond, Rudolph. I paid a witch to rip out the piece of my soul that connected to yours. Do you know how much that hurt? Nearly killed me. But I chose that pain over spending another day loving someone who would never truly choose me back." Kathleen wiped her tears away roughly. "So yes, I mean it. I don't want you. Not anymore." "The bond can be restored," Rudolph said desperately. "It's damaged, not destroyed. We can fix it. There are rituals, magic. I don't want it fixed." Kathleen's shout echoed across the camp. "Why can't you understand that? I don't want the bond. I don't want the connection. I don't want to feel you in my heart and my head every moment of every day. I want to be free of you, Rudolph. Completely and permanently free." The silence that followed was suffocating. Rudolph looked like she had reached into his chest and crushed his heart with her bare hands. "Good," Kathleen thought savagely. "Now he knows how it feels." But then his expression changed. The devastation gave way to something harder, more dangerous. His eyes flashed gold, and when he spoke, his voice carried the unmistakable weight of an alpha command. "I can't let you go." Kathleen's blood ran cold. "Excuse me. I said I can't let you go." Rudolph's voice was soft but unyielding. "You want me to stop destroying the realm? Fine. I'll stop. But only if you come back with me. Back to the palace. Back to where you belong. You're trying to negotiate with me?" Kathleen couldn't believe what she was hearing. "After everything I just said, you're going to try to bargain?" "I'm giving you a choice," Rudolph said. "Come back willingly, or I continue what I've been doing. I tear through the Shadowlands. I burn every settlement, question every rogue, destroy every safe haven until there's nowhere left for you to hide. And when the Shadowlands are nothing but ash, I'll move on to the next territory, and the next, until you finally accept that there is no escape from this. From us." Kathleen felt the trap closing around her. This was why he had come to the Shadowlands with an army. Not to search, but to force her hand. To give her an impossible choice. Surrender herself or watch innocent people die for her freedom. You're a monster, she breathed. Yes, Rudolph agreed simply. You made me one. The moment you left, the moment you severed our bond, you created this monster. So if you want it to stop, if you want to save all those innocent lives you're so concerned about, you know what you have to do. Kathleen looked at the man she had once loved more than breathing and saw a stranger. Tyrant. A king who had confused obsession with love and was willing to drown the world in blood to possess something he had already destroyed. But she also saw the truth in his threat. He would do it. He would burn the Shadowlands to nothing if she refused. Kathleen's mind raced, calculating odds, searching for options. Behind Rudolph, his warriors watched with predatory focus, ready to enforce whatever their king commanded. She thought of Christine hiding in the rocks, of Maven and all the refugees fleeing with children in their arms, of the families still trapped in the settlement waiting to see if they would live or die based on her decision. She thought of the woman she had been 3 years ago, willing to accept scraps of love just to stay near him. And she thought of the woman she had become, the one who had survived severing a mate bond, who had built a life from nothing, who had learned that sometimes the strongest choice was walking away. If I come with you, Kathleen said slowly, each word carefully measured, I need your word on something. Hope flared in Rudolph's eyes. Anything. You stop the raids immediately. You pull your forces out of the Shadowlands tonight. You leave these people in peace and you never come back here. No matter what happens between us. Done, Rudolph said without hesitation. And Geneva. Kathleen met his gaze steadily. You don't annul the marriage. You don't break the alliance. You don't punish her or her family for something that was your choice. Rudolph's expression darkened. Kathleen. Those are my terms, she interrupted. You say you'll do anything. Then prove it. Don't start a war because your pride demands I be your Luna. Geneva has done nothing wrong. She doesn't deserve to have her life destroyed because you finally developed a conscience. And what am I supposed to tell the realm? Rudolph demanded. That I have 2 Lunas. That I'm keeping my true mate as what, exactly? I don't care what you tell them, Kathleen said coldly. Figure it out. You're the Alpha King. But I will not be responsible for another woman suffering because of your choices. If you want me to come with you, Geneva keeps her crown and her dignity. Rudolph was silent for a long moment, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. His wolf was clearly raging at the idea, the possessive instinct demanding he claim Kathleen as his Luna before the entire realm. But finally he nodded. Fine. Geneva remains Luna. But you come back to the palace. Stay. And you give me a chance to prove that I've changed. I'll come back, Kathleen agreed, each word tasting like poison. But I'm not promising anything beyond that. I'm not promising forgiveness. I'm not promising to restore the bond. I'm not promising you anything except that I'll be there, alive, while you figure out how to live with what you've become. It wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Because Kathleen had learned something crucial in her 3 years away from the palace. Sometimes you had to walk back into the cage to find the key that would set you free forever. Rudolph stepped forward, reaching for her hand. Kathleen let him take it, felt the jolt of recognition even through the severed bond, felt his wolf respond to her presence like a man dying of thirst finally finding water. His fingers trembled as they closed around hers. Thank you, he whispered. Kathleen, I swear I'll make this right. I'll spend every day proving that I'm worthy of you. I'll save it, Kathleen said quietly. Just keep your word about the Shadowlands. That's all I want to hear from you right now. Rudolph nodded and turned to his second-in-command, who had been watching the entire exchange with carefully neutral expression. Emmett, pull the troops out. Immediately. No more raids, no more searches. We're leaving the Shadowlands as of tonight. Emmett's eyes widened slightly. My king, are you certain? Now, Emmett. Yes, my king. Emmett bowed and began issuing orders. Warriors mobilized with military efficiency, packing up camp, extinguishing fires, preparing to march. Kathleen watched it all with a strange detachment. She had done it. She had stopped the bloodshed, saved the Shadowlands, protected the people who had given her shelter when she had nowhere else to go. But the price was her freedom, possibly forever. Unless she could find another way out. "I need to say goodbye," Kathleen said suddenly. "To my friends. To the people who took me in." Rudolph's hand tightened on hers, clearly reluctant to let her out of his sight even for a moment. "I'll come with you." "No." Kathleen pulled her hand free. "You've terrorized them enough. Let me have this one thing. Or do you not trust me to come back after I gave you my word?" It was a calculated risk, challenging his trust. But Rudolph was desperate to prove he had changed, desperate to show he respected her choices. After a tense moment he nodded. 1 hour. Then we leave for the Northern Realm. Kathleen walked back toward where she had left Christine, feeling Rudolph's eyes burning into her back with every step. She found her friend still hiding in the rocks, her face pale with terror. "Kathleen," Christine gasped. "What did you do? What did you agree to?" "I bought us time," Kathleen said quietly, pulling Christine deeper into the shadows where they couldn't be overheard. "And I need you to do something for me. Anything." Kathleen pressed the vial of wolfsbane and a hastily scrawled note into Christine's hands. "Get this to Maven. Tell her everything that happened. And tell her." Kathleen paused, making sure Christine understood the gravity of what she was about to ask. "Tell her to contact the Witch Council, the ones who live in the deep woods. Tell them Kathleen Thorne is requesting sanctuary under the old laws." Christine's eyes went wide. "The old laws haven't been invoked in centuries. The Witch Council doesn't involve themselves in pack politics." "They will for this," Kathleen said grimly. "Because I'm not just an Omega running from a king. I'm something else entirely. Something the witches who severed my bond discovered but never told me about." She touched her chest where the mate bond used to burn. "My blood carries ancient magic, Christine. The kind that can dethrone Alpha Kings. The kind that makes me either the most valuable or the most dangerous wolf in the realm." "How do you know this?" "The witch who severed my bond told me right before I lost consciousness. She said my blood sang with old power, power that had been dormant until the bond trauma awakened it. She said I was marked by the moon goddess herself for a purpose beyond being any king's mate." Kathleen met Christine's shocked gaze. "I didn't understand what she meant then. But I've had 3 years to research to learn about my bloodline. My mother wasn't just an Omega, Christine. She was a moonborn. And that makes me something Rudolph can never control, no matter how many chains he wraps around me." Christine clutched the vial tighter. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to play the part of the captured mate," Kathleen said. "I'm going to let Rudolph think he's won. And while he's busy trying to repair a bond that can never be fixed, I'm going to discover exactly what this power inside me can do. Because if I'm right about what I am, then I don't need to run from the Alpha King anymore." She smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "I just need to learn how to destroy him." The journey back to the Northern Realm took 5 days. 5 days of riding beside Rudolph while he tried desperately to bridge the chasm between them with words that meant nothing. 5 days of watching him command his army with the same authority he had once used to hide her away. 5 days of planning. Kathleen played her part perfectly. She was civil but distant, answering his questions with careful neutrality, never giving him hope but never pushing him away completely. She let him believe that time and proximity might heal what he had broken, that his patient devotion might eventually wear down her walls. She let him believe he was winning. In truth, every mile closer to the palace brought a strange sense of clarity. The girl who had fled 3 years ago had been broken, desperate, convinced her only value came from being loved by a king. The woman returning was something else entirely. She had survived the unsurvivable. She had severed a mate bond and lived. And in doing so, she had awakened something ancient sleeping in her blood. She could feel it now, humming beneath her skin. Power. Raw and untamed, waiting to be unleashed. The palace rose before them on the 6th day. All silver stone and soaring towers, beautiful and suffocating. Kathleen's hands tightened on her horse's reins as memories crashed over her. The servant quarters where she had lived. The hidden corridors where Rudolph had stolen kisses. The great hall where she had watched him crown Geneva. "We'll give you the suite in the eastern wing," Rudolph said quietly, riding beside her. "Near my chambers. You'll have everything you need. Privacy, comfort, your own staff." "A gilded cage," Kathleen interrupted softly. Rudolph flinched. "No. Home. Where you always should have been." "Should have been," Kathleen repeated. "But wasn't. Because you were too ashamed to claim me." "Kathleen. I'm just stating facts, Rudolph." She looked at him directly for the first time all day. "Don't rewrite history to make yourself feel better about what you did. Own it. You were ashamed of me. Ashamed of what claiming an Omega mate would do to your precious reputation." "I was ashamed of myself," Rudolph said, his voice raw. "Not of you. Never of you. I was ashamed that I was too weak to do what was right. That I let fear control me instead of love." Before Kathleen could respond, a commotion at the palace gates drew their attention. Geneva stood on the steps, flanked by royal guards, her Luna crown glinting in the afternoon sun. She looked composed, regal, every inch the Queen Kathleen could never be. But when Geneva's eyes landed on Kathleen, something flickered in them. Not anger or jealousy, something closer to relief. "Welcome home, my king," Geneva said formally as they dismounted. Her gaze shifted to Kathleen. "And welcome to the palace, Kathleen. I hope you'll find your accommodations comfortable." The civility was clearly forced, but there was no cruelty in it. Geneva had known this day would come. She had probably been preparing for it since the moment Rudolph started his obsessive search. "Thank you, Luna Geneva," Kathleen said carefully, offering a small bow of respect. Geneva's eyes widened slightly at the gesture. Then she nodded and retreated into the palace, her attendants following like a flock of elegant birds. "That went better than expected," Rudolph muttered. "Did you tell her I was coming?" "I sent word ahead. I thought she deserved to know." Rudolph ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking exhausted. "She's been understanding. More understanding than she has any right to be." Guilt twisted in Kathleen's stomach. Geneva was trapped just as surely as Kathleen was, bound by duty to a king who would never love her, forced to play a role she never asked for. In another life they might have been allies. In this life, they were both prisoners of Rudolph's choices. The suite Rudolph had prepared was obscenely luxurious. Silk curtains, plush carpets, furniture that probably cost more than most wolves earned in a lifetime. A far cry from the sparse servants' quarters she had occupied before. Kathleen walked through the rooms with detached observation, noting the exits, the windows, the ways she might escape if necessary. Always planning. Always ready to run. "I'll leave you to rest," Rudolph said from the doorway, clearly reluctant to go. "But I'd like to have dinner with you tonight. Just the two of us. Please." Kathleen turned to face him, this king who had destroyed her and was now trying desperately to piece her back together. "Fine. Dinner. But Rudolph." She waited until he met her eyes. "Don't mistake my compliance for forgiveness. I'm here because you gave me no choice. Because I won't let innocent people die for your obsession. But I haven't forgiven you. And I don't know if I ever will." Pain flashed across his face, but he nodded. "I understand. I'll earn it. However long it takes, I'll earn your forgiveness." After he left, Kathleen sank onto the bed and let herself feel the full weight of what she had done. She was back in the palace. Back in Rudolph's orbit. Exactly where she swore she would never be again. But she wasn't the same woman who had fled. That night at dinner, Kathleen studied Rudolph across the table laden with more food than two people could possibly eat. He was trying so hard, asking gentle questions about her time in the Shadowlands, sharing stories about the realm, carefully avoiding anything that might upset her. It was exhausting. "Tell me about Geneva," Kathleen said suddenly, interrupting his story about a trade negotiation. Rudolph blinked, clearly thrown. What do you want to know? The truth. Does she know you're trying to win me back? Does she know what I am to you? She's always known, Rudolph admitted quietly. From the beginning. I told her our marriage was political only, that my heart belonged to someone else. She accepted those terms. How generous of her, Kathleen said, unable to keep the sarcasm from her voice. And how does she feel about me being here now? Rudolph was quiet for a moment. Relieved, I think. These past 3 years have been difficult for her too. Watching me spiral, dealing with the council, maintaining appearances while I tore the realm apart. I think part of her hopes that having you here will finally give me peace. And will it? Kathleen leaned forward. Will having me here give you peace, Rudolph? Or will it just make you realize that you can't force someone to love you back? I'm not trying to force anything. Yes, you are, Kathleen interrupted. You forced me back here by threatening innocent lives. You're forcing Geneva to remain your Luna while I'm here because you're too afraid of political consequences. You're trying to force me to forgive you by being patient and kind and wearing down my defenses. Everything you do is about control, Rudolph. You just dress it up as love. Rudolph's composure finally cracked. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. What do you want from me, Kathleen? Tell me what I need to do to fix this. I've stopped the raids. I've brought you home. I've given you space and respect and I want you to let me go. Kathleen stood as well, 3 years of rage finally breaking free. I want you to release me from this nightmare and let me live my own life without your shadow hanging over me. But you won't, will you? Because your pride, your obsession, your guilt won't let you. So instead we're stuck in this hellish dance where you pretend you're fighting for love and I pretend I might someday forgive you, when we both know the truth. What truth? Rudolph's voice was barely a whisper. That you didn't fight for me when it mattered, Kathleen said, tears streaming down her face. And now you're fighting for me when it's too late. And that difference, Rudolph. That's everything. The silence that followed was deafening. Rudolph stood frozen, her words striking him like physical blows. For 3 years he had told himself that finding Kathleen would fix everything, that bringing her home would heal the wounds he had caused. But looking at her now, seeing the pain and rage and exhaustion in her eyes, he finally understood the truth. He had already lost her. Not when she ran. Not when she severed the bond. He had lost her the moment he placed that crown on Geneva's head and chose his reputation over his mate. You're right, Rudolph said quietly, sinking back into his chair like a man defeated. About all of it. I was a coward when it mattered. And now I'm a tyrant trying to undo what can't be undone. I've spent 3 years telling myself I was searching for you out of love. But maybe it was just guilt. Maybe I just couldn't accept that I destroyed the best thing in my life through my own weakness. Kathleen watched him carefully, searching for manipulation, for the trap in his admission. But all she saw was a broken man finally confronting what he had become. What happens now? She asked softly. Rudolph looked up at her, and for the first time since she had returned, she saw clarity in his eyes instead of desperation. What do you want to happen? I want my freedom, Kathleen said immediately. But not just running away again. I want you to release me publicly. To tell the realm that you're letting me go, that I'm free to live my own life without fear of you hunting me down. The council will never allow it, Rudolph said. They'll say it makes me look weak, that it proves the Thorn bloodline is unstable. I don't care about the council, Kathleen interrupted. And neither should you. Not anymore. You've spent your entire life letting them control you, making decisions based on what they think is acceptable. Look where that got you. Look where that got us. Rudolph was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, if I do this, if I publicly release you, the political fallout will be catastrophic. The noble families will see it as proof that I'm unfit to rule. There might be challenges to my authority. Possibly even attempts to dethrone me. Then maybe you shouldn't be king, Kathleen said bluntly. Maybe a man who has to choose between his crown and his conscience doesn't deserve either. The words hung in the air between them, dangerous and true. Rudolf stood slowly, moving to the window that overlooked the palace grounds. The realm he had sacrificed everything to rule stretched out before him, beautiful and demanding. My father always said that being king meant putting the realm before everything else, Rudolf said quietly. Before comfort, before happiness, before love. I believed him. I structured my entire life around that principle. And it made me into someone I don't recognize anymore. He turned to face Kathleen, and she saw something shift in his expression. A decision being made. A burden being lifted. I'll do it, Rudolf said. I'll release you publicly. Tomorrow, in front of the council and the court. I'll tell them that you're free to go, that I have no claim on you, that any wolf who tries to harm or pursue you will answer to me personally. Kathleen's breath caught. She had expected him to fight harder, to negotiate, to find some way to keep her trapped. Just like that. Just like that, Rudolf confirmed. Because you're right. I didn't fight for you when it mattered. But maybe I can do one thing right. Maybe I can fight for your freedom now, even if it costs me everything. The council will revolt, Kathleen warned. Let them. Rudolf's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. I've spent 3 years being the monster they created, making decisions out of fear and desperation. Maybe it's time I made a decision based on what's actually right. Kathleen stared at him, searching for the catch, the hidden condition. But Rudolf's eyes were clear. For the first time since she had known him, he wasn't trying to control the outcome. He was simply letting her go. Why now? Kathleen asked. Why is it finally enough? Rudolf smiled sadly. Because I finally understand what loving you actually means. It's not possession. It's not obsession. It's not tearing the world apart to keep you close. It's wanting you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include me. Especially if it doesn't include me. Tears blurred Kathleen's vision. This was what she had needed 3 years ago. This courage, this selflessness, this willingness to sacrifice for her instead of sacrificing her. But it was too late. The damage was done. The love she had felt for him had died the night he crowned Geneva, and no amount of belated nobility could resurrect it. Could it? The thought whispered through her mind, unwelcome and dangerous. She pushed it away violently. No. She would not let herself hope again. She would not let herself believe that Rudolf had truly changed just because he was finally saying the right words. Tomorrow then, Kathleen said, her voice steady despite the tears. You make your announcement and I leave. No dramatic goodbyes. No last-minute negotiations. I just go. Where will you go? Rudolf asked. Somewhere you'll never find me, Kathleen said. Then softer. Somewhere I can finally heal. Rudolf nodded, accepting this. I hope you do. Heal, I mean. And Kathleen. He waited until she met his eyes. I'm sorry. For everything. For not being brave enough when it mattered. For hurting you in ways I can never undo. For wasting 3 years trying to fix something I should have just let go. I'm so incredibly sorry. The apology settled over Kathleen like a balm on old wounds. It didn't erase the pain, didn't undo the damage. But it acknowledged it. And somehow that was enough. I know, she whispered. I know you are. That night, Kathleen stood on her balcony watching the moon rise over the palace grounds. Tomorrow she would be free. Truly free, not running or hiding but released with the Alpha King's blessing. She should have felt triumph, relief, joy. Instead she felt hollow. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Geneva standing there, still wearing her Luna crown but looking exhausted. May I come in? Geneva asked. Kathleen stepped aside, curious. They had barely spoken since she arrived. Geneva entered and closed the door behind her. For a long moment, the two women simply looked at each other. The true mate and the chosen Luna. Both trapped by the same man's choices. He told me, Geneva said finally. About releasing you tomorrow. About finally letting you go. I'm sorry, Kathleen said, surprising herself. For the position this puts you in. The political fallout. Don't be, Geneva interrupted. I've been waiting 3 years for him to do this. To finally choose love over duty. Even if it means choosing to let go. I don't understand, Kathleen said carefully. Geneva smiled, and it was genuine. When I married Rudolph, I knew exactly what I was agreeing to. Political alliance. A loveless marriage. A king whose heart belonged to someone else. I accepted those terms because my family needed the alliance, and because I believed duty was more important than happiness. She paused, her expression growing thoughtful. But watching what Rudolph became without you, watching him destroy himself and everything around him searching for what he lost, I realized something. Duty without heart creates monsters. Love without courage creates cowards. We've all been paying the price for those lessons. So what happens to you now? Kathleen asked. When he releases me, when the council sees it as weakness. I'll survive, Geneva said simply. I'm stronger than they think. Stronger than Rudolph ever realized. And maybe finally I'll be free too. Free to find someone who chooses me first. Not out of duty or politics, but because they actually want me. The two women looked at each other with new understanding. They had both been casualties of the same man's inability to choose authentically. But they had both survived. And now, finally, they would both be free. I hope you find that, Kathleen said sincerely. Someone who chooses you first. I hope you find peace, Geneva replied. Real peace. Not just distance from pain, but actual healing. After Geneva left, Kathleen returned to the balcony. The moon was full and bright, illuminating the realm that had been her prison and her home. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow she would walk away from the palace, from Rudolph, from the mate bond that had defined and destroyed her. Tomorrow she would finally be free. But tonight, standing under the moon that had witnessed every moment of her journey, Kathleen allowed herself to feel everything. The pain of betrayal, the rage of abandonment, the grief of lost love. And underneath it all, buried deep, a tiny seed of something that might someday grow into forgiveness. Not for Rudolph. Not yet, maybe not ever. But for herself. 'Cause she had survived. She had endured the unsurvivable, severed a mate bond, rebuilt herself from ashes, and emerged stronger than she ever thought possible. She had fought for her freedom not with violence or vengeance, but by simply refusing to accept anything less than she deserved. And that was a victory no one could take from her. The next morning, Rudolph stood before the council and the court, with Geneva beside him and Kathleen in the audience. His voice was steady as he made his announcement, releasing Kathleen from any claim, declaring her free to live her life without interference or pursuit. The council erupted in outrage. Nobles shouted accusations of weakness, but Rudolph stood firm. For the first time in his life, he chose love over duty, even if that love meant letting go. Kathleen watched from the crowd, and as Rudolph's eyes found hers across the great hall, she saw something that broke and healed her simultaneously. Acceptance, release, and underneath it all, a love that had finally learned what it actually meant to love someone. She nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of his courage, of his growth, of the man he had finally become when it was too late for them but perhaps just in time for him to save himself. Then she turned and walked out of the palace, out of the northern realm, and into a future that belonged entirely to her. Behind her, Rudolph watched her go. His heart breaking and healing at the same time. He had lost her. Completely, irreversibly, permanently. But in losing her, he had found something else. His integrity, his courage, his authentic self. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Years would pass before they saw each other again. Years of healing, of growth, of becoming the people they were always meant to be. And when they finally met again at a gathering of the Great Pax, they would greet each other as old friends who had survived a war together. Not as mates, not as lovers, but as two people who had learned the hardest lessons about love, choice, and courage, and had both emerged stronger for it. Kathleen would have built a life she loved, leading a sanctuary for displaced Omegas, teaching them that their worth was never dependent on being chosen by someone else. The ancient power in her blood had been channeled into healing instead of destruction, and she had found peace she never knew was possible. Rudolph would have become a better king, one who led with both strength and compassion, who challenged the council instead of cowering before them, who remembered the cost of choosing duty over conscience. And Geneva would have found her own happiness with a wolf who chose her first, who loved her fiercely and publicly, who proved that sometimes the greatest gift is being released from the wrong love to find the right one. They would all carry scars from their story, but they would also carry wisdom, strength, and the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful act of love is letting go. Because true love doesn't cage. It doesn't possess. It doesn't destroy everything to keep what it wants. True love sets free. And in that freedom, everyone finally finds their way home. Thank you so much for watching this story unfold. If you made it all the way to the end, drop a comment letting me know what you thought. Did Kathleen make the right choice? Should Rudolph have fought harder, or did he finally do the right thing? And what about Geneva? Didn't she deserve better all along? I love hearing your thoughts. If you enjoyed this emotional journey, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that will wreck your heart in the best way possible. Until next time, remember that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose yourself.